Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 135 based on novel. So let's start. As the founder of Nine Heavens Eyes Awakening Skill, Blind was known as Divine Eye Spear God. Because of his powerful divine eyes, he had extremely high attainments in the path of formations. Even if Qin Mu awakened all 9 heavens of his heaven's eyes, he still wouldn't be able to break free. I still have 2 huge eyeballs here, sun and moon jade eyes. Maybe they can break open Grandpa Blind's restriction. However, his expression became troubled. The circle Blind had drawn was so small that the 2 eyes couldn't be placed inside. Qin Mu took a look at the dragon Qilin and the dozens of flood dragons. He immediately took out the Emperor's disc and executed secrets of dragon control with the flute. The flood dragons then snarled and attacked the circle. Even with their numbers, they still weren't able to break the circle. The light screen kept on breaking down and reassembling itself, changing continuously to keep its victim trapped inside. Qin Mu also didn't dare to let the flood dragons use their full power. If the circle couldn't withstand the attacks and broke, he might be blown to pieces as well. He was completely out of ideas. He could only wait in the circle until Blind stole a wife for him. Sunshot Divine Cannon was still flying in the sky and floating back to the capital city. On the battery, Emperor Yangfeng looked at the burning pill furnace with an aching heart. In his eyes, what was burning weren't medicinal stones, but bags and bags of great abundance coins. The amount burned made even him feel pangs of pain. At that moment, a human figure suddenly flashed past the battery and disappeared. What a fast speed! Emperor Yangfeng exclaimed in admiration. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked over. He looked into the distance and said, "Seems to be that blind old man who fought with the gods of high heavens. He should be the spear god from back then. It's a pity he can't be employed by me." Emperor Yangfeng sighed. When it came to midnight, that figure hurriedly sprinted back, passing by the battery again. Emperor Yangfeng took a look at him and asked suspiciously, "Why is the spear god carrying a huge sack?" "I have no idea." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was also slightly puzzled. The experts outside the mortal world all have some weird hobbies. The elders in Cult Master Qin's family all have some weird addictions that are hard to understand. When the sun was high up in the sky, they came to the outskirts of the capital and lowered the battery down. The guards in the palace immediately rushed out and knelt on the floor. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. The 6th princess was kidnapped last night by an old man with a walking cane." Emperor Yangfeng was in a daze. Old man with a walking cane. Imperial Preceptor, was that spear god an old man with? Qin Mu woke up when the sky was already bright. Blind also returned at that time. He placed down a huge burlap sack, and there was a girl's voice coming from inside it. "Fatty pig, come over, reveal your true form." Blind brought the dragon Qilin over, and had him transform into a huge behemoth that was 120 yards long. Blind placed the burlap sack on his back and walked over, erasing the circle with his bamboo cane. He smiled and said, "Mua, return to the village to get married. Grandpa Blind, forced love does not last." Qin Mu immediately said, "It will definitely last." Blind brought him to the dragon Qilin's back. He said while beaming at him, "If it doesn't last, I will just return it and change to a lasting one. You are in for a treat, boy. Fatty pig, stop in the town in front and buy some phoenix coronets and bridal gowns." The dragon Qilin acknowledged his command. His true form was extremely wide, and when he ran, it was as steady as a huge ship. Qin Mu undid the burlap sack, and beautiful black hair flowed out from inside. A familiar fragrance assaulted his nostrils. The burlap sack squirmed, and Ling Yuxiu raised her head up. A cloth was stuffed in her mouth, and she cried out while nudging forward. Blind stood to the side and smiled proudly. Qin Mu immediately pulled the girl out from the burlap sack, and saw that her arms and legs were tied firmly by golden ropes. She couldn't move at all. He pulled out the cloth from her mouth, and was about to untie the golden rope, when the burlap sack suddenly squirmed again. There was another maiden inside, and she popped her small head out. Qin Mu was shocked and immediately went forward to bring the other maiden out from the burlap sack. It was Cai Yinxiang who looked flustered, her beautiful hair messed up. Qin Mu's mind was blown and he stuttered, "Gee, Grandpa Blind, you kidnapped too." There was still something moving in the burlap sack, and Qin Mu's face couldn't help turning black. A small girl popped her head out and looked helplessly at him. Qin Mu was completely speechless. "Why have you even kidnapped Linga?" He went forward in a hurry to pull the little girl, that was around 6 or 7 years old, out. "When I went to kidnap the princess and the saintess, I picked her up on the way." Blind was still beaming at him. They were all living in Imperial College's Divine Arts residence, right next door. "There's no time like the present, so you shall marry and consummate tonight. Who do you like? Choose freely." Qin Mu pulled out the cloths in Cai Yinxiang and Hu Linga's mouths. Hu Linga was overjoyed and asked bashfully, "Are we getting married tonight?" "I'm still not prepared." Blind smiled and said, "No matter if it is the princess, or the saintess, or even the little demon fox, it's all fine. If you want to marry all three at once, that is also all right. I can get to carry babies sooner. Say, who do you pick?" The three girls looked nervously at Qin Mu, who didn't say a word. He went to undo the golden rope, but it suddenly revealed a head. It opened its mouth and almost bit him. Qin Mu jumped back in shock, and immediately pulled his hand away. "This is dragon's tendon, and not any ordinary rope, you can't undo it." Blind sneered and said, "This dragon's tendon is the tendon of a real dragon, and not something of those flood dragons." Qin Mu sighed and said, "Grandpa Blind, you are messing around again." "Granny, why are you here?" Blind immediately turned back, and Qin Mu exploded with heaven-pilfering divine legs to run away at full speed. Blind raised his bamboo cane to tap at the void. The next moment, Qin Mu lost all his strength in midair and fell from the sky. Thump! A heavy object landed in the distance. Truly worrisome. Blind shook his head and took out another golden rope. It flew out and firmly tied Qin Mu up, flying him back to the dragon Chilene's back. Grandpa Blind, forced love doesn't, woo. Blind stuffed a cloth in his mouth and put him with the three girls while muttering to himself, "One day one girl, it will surely last." The dragon Chilene carried everyone to the village in front, and Blind immediately took care of the purchases. He bought phoenix coronets and bridal gowns, some other outfits, and a big red silk ball for Qin Mu. He invited a few old women to help the four to change. Emperor Yangfeng lost his daughter, so he might find his way here. Who knows what will happen if we drag this out, so it's best they consummate immediately. Blind took out some great abundance coins from the little fox's bag to buy a huge house with a courtyard. He also hired some maids and took care of all other things, preparing to have them marry that day. Qin Mu was tied up firmly, but his cultivation was still there. He secretly blew the golden flute to make the flood dragons launch a sneak attack on Blind and tie him up. However, just as the golden flute sounded, before it could make a connection with the flood dragons, Blind sensed something wrong. He tapped the heart of Qin Mu's brows with his bamboo cane, and Qin Mu heard booming coming from his body. His 6 directions, 5 elements, and spirit embryo divine treasures were forcefully closed one after another. Blind was scared of him playing any tricks, So he sealed Ling Yuxiu and Cai Yunxiang's divine treasures as well. Hu Linga saw him walking over and jumped in excitement. Grandpa Blind, don't worry, Linga won't run. Blind immediately loosened the golden rope on her body. I shall untie your ropes, so help me look after them. I shall go book a few banquet tables and invite a theatrical troupe. All right, the little fox said without a moment's hesitation. Traitor! Ling Yuxiu and Cai Yunxiang stared at her angrily. Hu Linga was immensely proud of herself. She jumped into a chair and swayed her braids. Grandpa Blind sure is experienced, Qin Mu exclaimed in his heart, admiring him endlessly. The divine art he'd just used had casually sealed their cultivations, making them unable to execute their tricks even if they had any. Fatty dragon, come over. Qin Mu's gaze flickered as he called the dragon Qilin over. Carry us and run. The dragon Qilin shook his head. Since I can't run faster than him, might as well not run. When he was done, he wagged his tail and went back to guard the door. Qin Mu was stunned. He felt the dragon Qilin needed to lose weight severely. When night time came, Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu were held down by a few old women and forced to marry each other. Blind had invited nearly all the people in the small town to witness the wedding. He didn't accept any gifts, and the theatrical troupe also consisted of only ordinary people playing horns and swana. Everything was very basic. The wedding was naturally very bustling, though, and finally Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu were sent into the bridal room by the townsfolk. Hu Linga was unhappy to see that the bride wasn't her and began to drink a lot, spewing nonsense. Blind waved his hand and said, "Come again tomorrow, there'll be another wedding. The groom will be the same, but the bride will be changed." This groom is truly a lucky man, everyone exclaimed and left. Hu Linga jumped onto the table, carrying a wine jar that was bigger than hers. She said in a drunken stupor, "Grandpa Blind, I want to be the bride tomorrow." All right, all right." Blind nodded repeatedly. In the room, Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the commotion gradually fading into the distance. They felt slightly terrified and anxious. After a moment, Ling Yuxiu lifted a corner of her veil and took a sneaky glance at Qin Mu, who was wearing the big red silk ball at her side. He was clutching it nervously, and she suddenly burst into laughter. Qin Mu stared at her. "You can still laugh. If your father learns of this, he'll definitely take my head off." Wanting to lift up the veil, Ling Yuxiu rolled her eyes and giggled. People say that it's unlucky for a girl to take off her own veil, a man must do it. There's even such a rule. Qin Mu was astonished. He took the veil off of her and became stunned. The powdered and rosy-cheeked girl was indescribably captivating under the candlelight. Ling Yuxiu blushed bashfully and rolled her eyes at him. "What are you looking at? So beautiful." Qin Mu then stood up and went to push the door, but he couldn't open it. Grandpa Blind locked the door. "I'll go and check the windows." He opened the window and was about to jump out when a bamboo cane pointed at him. Blind's voice followed right after it. "Sleep, don't think of running." Qin Mu jumped in shock and said furiously, "Grandpa Blind, why are you squatting at the corner?" "Rules," Blind said. "Don't worry, I'm blind, I can't see anything." "Sure you can't." Qin Mu closed the window and sat back down on the edge of the bed. "Grandpa Blind is guarding over there, so I'm afraid we can't escape," he said, slightly depressed. The two of them sat at the side of the bed. Ling Yuxiu clutched the corner of her skirt, while Qin Mu held onto the red silk ball in front of his chest. After some time, Blind's coughing came from outside the window. "There are nuptial cups on the table, quickly drink them and sleep." Qin Mu picked up the wine jar and smashed it. Blind was furious and walked away with the cane. After a moment, they could hear him begin to beat a rooster. What's the use of having a small rooster that doesn't crow? If you don't crow, I will break your leg. Is Grandpa blind scolding the rooster or me? Qin Mu was puzzled. After a moment, the window opened and a bamboo cane with a broken rooster leg appeared at the window. Qin Mu closed the window and went back to sit down on the edge of the bed. He muttered, "We haven't met for quite a while." Ling Yuxiu burst out laughing. "You are still bad with words. I'm slightly sleepy, so I shall go to rest first." "Okay." Qin Mu saw her wormed under the blanket, until a small head popped out from under the big red blanket. Ling Yuxiu blinked at him. "I'm sleeping." "Okay." Ling Yuxiu gave a humph and turned to the other side. Qin Mu also laid down and covered himself with the blanket. The two of them shared a pillow and looked each other in the face. Qin Mu didn't dare to breathe, and Ling Yuxiu burst out laughing, her breath fanning his face. It instantly reddened, and the girl quickly gave him a peck on the lips. "Smells pretty nice." Qin Mu blinked and said, "Kiss again." Ling Yuxiu gave him another kiss, giggling. "What's the use of kissing?" Blind's impatient voice came from outside, slowly moving farther away. "Little rooster can't crow, so it's better to stew it and eat." "Eh?" Emperor Yang Feng has caught up. "Come to think of it, the emperor is now an in-law, so I can't be rude. I need to treat in-laws to a wedding feast, so I shall slaughter this rooster that doesn't crow to treat in-laws." Qin Mu heard him walking farther away, and quickly left the bed. He went to the window and opened it sneakily. He stretched his head out to survey the surroundings, then waved to Ling Yuxiu, but she didn't come over. He turned his head back and saw that the girl seemed to be really asleep. Qin Mu went over carelessly and said quietly, "Stop acting, quickly get up." Ling Yuxiu's face flushed, and she immediately left from under the blanket. She put on her shoes and crawled out through the window while Qin Mu received her on the other side, bringing her down. The two of them sneaked along the wall to Cai Yinxiang's room. When they came to her window, Qin Mu asked quietly, "Is Sister Xiong asleep?" "Not yet." Her voice came from behind, and Qin Mu jumped in shock. He swiftly turned back and saw her sneakily following behind him. "When did you come out?" he asked in astonishment. Cai Yinxiang seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. "I've sneaked out a long time ago, and wanted to listen from the wall. But in the end, I just heard a little female cat in heat calling out, yet there was no little male cat coming." Ling Yuxiu sneered and said, "Some female cats don't even have the right to call for a little male cat. Cowherd boy, let's go and find the little fox. Linger has rebelled." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "Let's go now," not making any sound. "Where's Cult Master going?" The dragon Qilin suddenly appeared behind them, shocking all three. "Traitor!" Qin Mu gritted his teeth. "If you still want to eat, don't be noisy or else we will have a dragon banquet for New Year's." The dragon Qilin shuddered and followed behind them softly. "Grandpa Blind is out. He said he's inviting Emperor Yang Feng for a wedding feast. We can sneak out now." Qin Mu looked behind the dragon Qilins, but saw over a dozen flood dragons sneakily following after. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It might be unsafe leaving Linger here alone. Where's she? The dragon Qilin lowered his head, and a snow-white fox showed up on his forehead, sleeping peacefully. "Go. Go quickly. If the emperor is here, my head is really going to roll." Qin Mu pulled onto the two girls and jumped on the back of the dragon Qilin with all his strength. "Don't use the fire clouds, or else Grandpa Blind will see. His eyesight is very good. We shall leave the town secretly, without alerting anyone." The dragon Qilin carried them out and headed south. After sprinting for 100 miles, Qin Mu was finally at ease and said, "You can now run with your full strength." The dragon Qin increased his speed and ran the whole night. He traveled 3,000 or 4,000 miles, and Qin Mu smiled. "Grandpa Blind's eyes shouldn't be able to see this far. Fatty dragon, you can rest now. Surging river is right in front of us, so let's go by the riverside to reach the East Sea. We can then take a detour to the capital. Is Linger awake? Tie up the traitor. She's still drunk." They came to the surging river, and were about to find a ship, when they saw one sailing down from the center of the river. On its bow was an old blind man propping himself on a cane. Qin Mu's face turned ashen. "I've chased Emperor Yangfeng all the way to Great Thunderclap Monastery," Blind said calmly. "Mua, I've been waiting for you guys for 2 hours and only now did you reach here. I'm disappointed." Qin Mu was stunned, while the dragon Qin immediately shouted, "Old Master Blind, I knew you were here so I rushed over with all my might." Everyone could only board the ship which immediately sailed them to Great Ruins. "When we are back at the village, it won't be too late to host the 2 remaining weddings," Blind said while beaming. "Yesterday night, I invited Emperor Yangfeng to eat chicken, so he most likely agreed to the marriage." Qin Mu could already see himself being escorted to the market to be beheaded. Suddenly, the river water became turbulent, and the current grew in speed. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He hurriedly leaned over the side of the ship. He saw the water current suddenly turn back calm, but the water level grew higher and higher, until it gradually became as high as the trees and mountain on both sides of the river. Ling Yuxia ran to the bow while Sai Yinxiang went to the aft to look upstream and downstream. Both of them were stunned by the sight, for they could see surging river floating up from the river canal like a long jade ribbon. More and more of the river water floated into the sky like a water dragon. Everyone looked at it in a daze. The small ship sailed along the long river in the sky and looked numerous times smaller than before. Besides the group's ship, there were fishing and treasure ships transporting ores, black gold, black iron, and black copper. There were also merchant ships carrying goods and transport ships ferrying passengers. Surging river was flourishing, and the fish were plump and delicious, thus there were many ships in the river as well as at the port. Yet the mountains on both sides vanished below the river, and only ships were left on its surface. All of them stopped, and countless people stretched their heads out to look outside, not knowing what had happened. Divine arts practitioners flew up from their ship, looking at surging river in a daze. Surging river floated in mid-air, its water stretching tens of thousands of miles in length. It continued to flow in the sky and gave off multicolored rays from the sun shining on it. Whoosh! A merchant ship that was transporting goods didn't manage to stop and sailed out of the river, falling from the sky. It fell toward the mountains helplessly and became smaller and smaller. After a moment, it crashed into a forest, but it took quite a while for the sound to reach the people on the river, which was a very dull thud. The owner of the merchant ship had hurriedly jumped out when the ship was falling and numerous divine arts practitioners had helped to save the crew, so there weren't too many casualties. There were Eternal Peace Empire's officials on a government cargo ship, and they immediately ordered divine arts practitioners to save people first, carry away the commoners on the other ships and send them to the land below. Some soldiers were also sent away to seek assistance from the city, invite people to save everyone on surging river. "It's not my fault, don't look at me, I didn't do it." Qin Mu and the rest looked at Blind, who was shaking his head with a grim expression. To have surging river rise like that, his magic power is much stronger than mine. I have yet to see a person with such dense magic power. Take a look below. Qin Mu and the rest immediately looked downwards. Surging river had been raised and floated in the sky, its water separated from the land. The current, which was somewhat muddy, couldn't be seen. All the sand and the mud in the river had vanished. When surging river had risen into the sky, only the water had been moved, the mud and sand weren't touched. Because of that, the river water had become incomparably clear, so they could see the land below through it. The group saw the marvelous sight of huge fish swimming about. Because surging river originated in great ruins, there were numerous fish monsters and water monsters that usually remained in its depths, growing in all kinds of shape and sizes. Qin Mu had lived beside the river since he was young and had seen all kinds of fish and water monsters. However, he still noticed numerous fish and water monsters he had never seen before. They had to have been hidden deep at the bottom and rarely rose to the surface, so it was hard to see them. Yet the river was see-through right then, and the hair of everyone stood up on end. An incomparably huge and long satiny body brushed past the bottom of the group's ship. The creature moved along with the current and swam toward the west. Huge scales grazed the hull of the ship. It shook for a moment before becoming steady again. When the huge body swam past, it didn't raise any waves at all. When the scales grazed the hull of the ship, they didn't damage it. There was only some turbulence, as though rapid currents had hit the bottom of the ship. That creature was a sapphire blue flood dragon that was incomparably huge. On the ship, the flood dragons became excited. Some of them climbed onto Qin Mu's neck while others poked their heads out from under his armpits and looked around. "Maha! Maha!" cried the dozen more flood dragons. Whoosh! A huge head rose from the water and looked at them curiously before diving back in to swim away. Wherever it passed, the water monsters of surging river avoided it. Some huge fish were so frightened that they escaped too quickly and left the water, flapping their fins as they fell from the sky. The clouds rained fish, which would give the commoners something to discuss for days. However, what would give them even more stuff to ponder about was that surging river had risen into the sky. That flood dragon is so huge. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently. The sapphire blue flood dragon was much bigger than the complete forms of the little dragons around him. It was over 10 times larger. The sapphire blue flood dragon could be even stronger than dragon rearing sovereign. Qin Mu didn't know, however, if it was a dragon raised by dragon rearing sovereign, or one that's been called over from somewhere. This is a water flood dragon that has cultivated to the god realm. His power to control water is very powerful, terrifyingly powerful. Blind had a grim expression as he looked to the west. He said in a hoarse voice, "I saw a man that had scales all over its body and looked very weird." He instructed this divine flood dragon king to raise surging river. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Could dragon rearing sovereign of high heavens have come to take the dragon vein? I once saw his ability to move rivers. Blind gripped his bamboo cane tightly, his face slightly nervous. Such a dense magic power is truly powerful. This fellow should have borrowed the power of divine flood dragon king to raise his magic power to its extreme. No, that's not right. It would still not be enough to raise surging river up. He is borrowing the power of surging river as well. Qin Mu executed 9 heavens eyes awakening technique and looked upstream. He could only awaken until the level of Cinnabar heaven's eyes, so he couldn't see the middle section of surging river where dragon rearing sovereign should be. If he wanted to raise surging river, the middle section was the best place to exert force. According to Qin Mu's understanding of dragon rearing sovereign, he shouldn't have the power to raise surging river. It had to have been borrowed from the divine flood dragon king. He had most likely invited him to raise surging river at the estuary, while he placed flood dragons at the other places to stir up havoc, raising all of surging river. Dragon rearing sovereign was knowledgeable about dragon veins, and was skilled in directing their power. Other than inviting the divine flood dragon king over, he had even called other flood dragons, but the most crucial thing was that he had probably mobilized the power of the dragon vein as well. With surging river's own power, He had raised the giant body of water that stretched across tens of thousands of miles into the sky. Surging River was very ancient, and it was a dragon vein since founding Emperor era that was filled with many secrets. Due to that, it might soon mature and transform into a dragon. The power of Surging River's dragon vein was extremely great. If Dragon Rearing Sovereign was able to mobilize it, there was a good chance he could raise the river up. Does he plan on taking away Surging River's dragon vein? Qin Mu muttered. Blind shook his head. It's not that. He plans to change the path of the dragon vein, so it would become a fierce dragon. With that, the fate of Eternal Peace Empire will be changed completely as well. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He immediately took out Dragon Rearing Scripture, and flipped to one of the pages. It introduced all kinds of dragon veins, and one paragraph mentioned how to change the path of the dragon vein to change fate and destiny. It detailed how to change the fate of an entire country. His planning to guide great ruins to Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu cried out. From what was recorded inside Dragon Rearing Scripture, the consequences of Dragon Rearing Sovereign's action would be no small matter. Just by changing the path of Surging River, he would force the dangers of great ruins to flow into eternal peace. If he succeeded, Eternal Peace Empire would be gradually transformed into a place that was like great ruins, one that was invaded by darkness at night. A very remarkable fellow. Blind's eye sockets were empty, but he seemed to be able to see where Dragon Rearing Sovereign was located. He gripped his bamboo cane tightly and tapped on the river surface while saying, an ant-hole may cause the collapse of a great dike. So he just needs to change the path of the dragon vein slightly to borrow its power to guide the darkness from great ruins into Eternal Peace Empire, spoiling its fate. His studies on dragons are extremely profound and his attainments are astounding. His bamboo cane tapped gently on the river surface, and the ship below their feet shot forward like an arrow that had left the bow. They sailed straight for the middle stream of Surging River, their speed so fast that the ship started creaking, unable to handle the pressure. It was about to break apart at any moment. Crack! This ship broke apart, and countless wooden shards flew in all directions. Qin Mu and the others all executed their magic power to run on the river surface. However, the water under their feet churned. Fierce dragons' roars could be heard as water dragons rose up, carrying their bodies forward at a rapid pace. Blind held onto his bamboo cane while sitting on a dragon's head. Qin Mu and the rest looked nervously at both sides, seeing 10,000 dragons roaring while flying forward. This surging river is the territory of Old Blind. Under their feet, Surging River rushed forward, and Blind's clothes fluttered in the wind as he overflowed with murderous intent. Have you asked this Dragon King before moving it? The water dragons surged toward the west. The youths didn't know how far they had traveled when Blind suddenly raised his bamboo cane and tapped on the dragon's head heavily. The water in a few 100-mile radius trembled violently, and Surging River looked like a long dragon whose waist had been severely injured, because of which it uncontrollably fell to the ground. At the riverbed below, Dragon Rearing Sovereign's feet moved like those of a dragon, slithering around as he raised his hands up high. Violent magic power flooded out, and raised up heat-faltering sections of Surging River. At the same time, a huge stone beast that was dozens of yards tall at the bottom of the river got wrapped by his magic power and flung out to the foothills. Dragon Chasing Technique from Dragon Rearing Scriptures. Dragon Rearing Sovereign had hurried up from downstream, and along the way he'd seen numerous stone creatures, which were river suppression beasts. They had been forged by the officials of Eternal Peace Empire, and all kinds of runes were imprinted on them. They were used to suppress the dragon vein in case its tremors caused water hazards. There were quite a number of extraordinary people in Eternal Peace Empire who could recognize dragon veins, so they had ordered skilled blacksmiths to forge river suppression beasts to suppress the dragon vein. Usually, Because of them, surging river's dragon vein would be obedient. But once they were pulled out one by one, the power of the dragon vein was completely activated. Other than river suppression beasts, there were also a lot of strange items that had been brought downstream, each one of them more bizarre than the other. Dragon-rearing sovereign tried to avoid them as much as possible, so that he wouldn't meet unnecessary trouble. The closer he got to Great Ruins, the more and more of those strange items were in his way. Surging river in there actually also had stone statues suppressing it, so it was definitely impossible for dragon-rearing sovereign to lift it there. But his aim wasn't to take away surging river, so there was no need to trouble himself with that. He just needed to change the path of the dragon vein and its origin, so would become a fierce dragon. But at that moment, surging river that was in mid-air suddenly came crashing down. Shocked, dragon-rearing sovereign stood still, his hands frozen above his head. Suddenly, the river water above transformed into a huge pillar which came stabbing down. This video will end here.